Hello members. Sorry I couldn't be at your conference this year. Due to a small mix-up, I wasn't able to make it, but I hope this suffices just as well and you're able to get just as much information from me in my virtual setting as you would as if I was live on stage. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, we are in Melbourne, and we'll talk about all the things that you'd like to talk about in relation to customer service and getting the most out of your job and enhancing the experience for the visitors to your municipality or your region. Okay, sit back, relax, and let's get to it. The intergenerational workforce. Great question. Thank you very much for that one. Things have changed. You see, what's happened is over the last 50 or so years, the workforce has changed. Never before have we had 4 generations in the workplace at one time. We've got our baby boomers, our generation X's, our generation Y, our generation Z, and our millennials. Now you see, the generation gap, if we went back 50, 60, 70 years, wouldn't have mattered so much because things changed very slowly. But however, with the introduction of technology over the last 25 years, that generation gap is no longer a generation gap, it's a generation chasm. It's absolutely humongous. And the biggest reason for that is technology. Technology has shaped and changed human beings. I mean, if you think about it, way back in the day, when the baby boomers were in their teens, you know, television was the new thing. And it was black and white television, I'll have you know. And some of you might even remember that. And most households only had one TV. And in sometimes there was only one TV in the street. But if you look at it now, I'd like you to take a moment and think about your home, where you live. And I'd like you to think about how many screens inhabit your home. Do a little bit of a calculation. There's probably the main TV. And then there's your smart device, which is, if you've got children in the home, there's probably 2 or 3 of those. And then you've got your iPad, your laptop. You might even still have a desktop computer. How many screens are in your home? But it's not just the fact of the number of screens, it's how we use those screens and how things have changed. So technology has created this generation chasm because we use things differently. If you think about the telephone, most of us remember we used to pick it up and we used to dial. Yeah, you remember. We used to dial away and have a conversation one-on-one. But if you look at most of the young people today, the thing that they use their everything device for, it's no longer just a telephone, it's an everything device. And if you're talking to someone who's 25 years or younger, the thing that they use this for least is making telephone calls. They don't make telephone calls anymore. They text, they use emojis, they use WhatsApp, they use Pinterest, and they use, I don't know, Instagram, all sorts of different methods of communication. So I think the first thing that we need to look at in the workplace is how we communicate. And I think we need to be very forgiving around that. So for example, the first example that I will use of managing an intergenerational workforce is understanding that not everybody's the same, and depending on when you were born, will depend on what kind of technology you choose to use to communicate. Now that's not to say that things that were done in the past are wrong and shouldn't be used. They're still very valuable. The telephone, the landline, is still a big integral part of business. But however, so is text. So how do we manage across the generations? Well, I've got 3 or 4 points for you. Here's the first one. I think it's really important that we are open and we're honest with each other about the differences. I mean, let me give you an example. If someone under the age of 25 is sick and can't come to work for whatever reason, and they text you and to tell you they can't come to work, maybe they're not being rude. Maybe think about it from their point of view. Maybe for a 25-year-old or younger, that is their main form of communication. This is their everything device, as I've mentioned before. And texting is as natural to them as picking up the phone for some of us who are maybe Generation X or baby boomers. So maybe be aware that when someone is talking with you using their particular device of choice, it's their device of choice. It's not a matter of disrespect. Really important. I think that's right across the board. We need to get inside someone else's shoes. Now, my second point is this. It's about staying aware of the new technologies and the changes that are going on in the world. It's not just technologies, it's also a change of language and a change of the way that we see things. If you think back to when some of us first entered the workplace, there are things that we could do, things that we could say, and some general business norms which are no longer acceptable today. So I think we need to be aware of the new ways that people like to be addressed. For example, I'm going to give you some letters now. Tell me if you know what they mean. L, G, B, T, I, Q, A. Now that's quite an alphabet soup we've got going on there. But how many of those do you really know? Let's start with the L. The L stands for lesbian. The G stands for gay. The B stands for bisexual. The T, that stands for transgender. The I is intersex. The Q is queer. And the A is ally. Now that we've looked at the definitions, let's have a look and see how that's changed in the workplace over the years. If we went back 20, 30, or even 10 years ago, and someone in the workforce came out as gay, or lesbian, or transgender, they would have most likely been fired from their job or faced serious harassment and bullying without any comeback at all. So we've got to understand that that's changed. And one of the new changes that myself, that I'm having to come to terms with, and my children remind me of on occasion, is that we've now got different gender pronouns. So people would now like to be called things such as he, she are no longer relevant. Some people like to be called they, it, them. So we must be aware and we must be opening to learning new ways of communication and new things that have happened and the way that different people like to be treated. And we must stay aware and stay abreast of those changes. So it is a good idea to do some study. It is a good idea to learn new things. It is a good idea to talk to different people, find out their experiences. We can all learn from each other. That's a point that I'd like to make. We can all learn from each other, which goes into my next point, point number 2 for me. No one generation rules the workplace. Let me say that again. No one generation rules the roost of the workplace. Now, you might have been somewhere for 25 years. You might have been there for 25 days, but you're both equally valid. When I say that no one generation rules the roost or the workplace, if you've been there for 25 years, you've got enormous amounts of experience that you bring to the table. You bring 25 years of knowledge. For the person that's been there 25 days, they bring outside knowledge, from a workplace that you may not have been at. Different technologies, different ways of doing things. They may have learned new skills, have new ideas to share, things that we've never thought about. If you think about it, it's great that some of us are long-term employees, but if we were all long-term employees, that means that we wouldn't have the depth in our culture as a team. We need the long stayers, but we also need the new blood, people coming in. And I'm not talking about just young people. People change job mid-career. People change jobs and come into work later in life. Some of us took 4, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe more, when we had our children. Some of us didn't take a gap at all. But we need that mix. When we're talking about managing the intergenerational workplace, we also need to see it as managing diversity, because its age is only one aspect of diversity. And that's really important. Humility. Humility is the key when engaging in a difficult conversation. The other thing we need to do is get rid of the idea that you're having a difficult conversation. You see, when you tell yourself you've got a difficult conversation, your fear levels rise exponentially. And the other thing that I'd like to talk about very briefly is there's no such thing as a difficult team member or a difficult customer. Now, I know some of you, you're going to be looking at me right now going, Rum, I've got difficult staff members, or I've had difficult customers. Well, the truth of the matter is this. While you see a staff member as difficult, you are part of the problem. Because each time you approach them, you will be sending out signals, verbal signals, and also your body language. Through your body language, you'll be sending out negative signals and also negative energy. And now look, I haven't got the hair to be a hippie, it's just not long enough. But what I'm saying is, it's like, you've heard of that song, Good Vibrations, or someone says that resonates with me, or you resonate with someone. Well, it's absolutely true. We as human beings all have an energy field. That's science. It's not hippie, it's not conspiracy, it's science. Human beings radiate an energy. Now, when you're in sync with someone, that energy resonates. And when I say resonates, if you were to take two crystal glasses and put them on the table and tap them with metal, what happens is that the first glass starts to sing, and the second glass will also start to sing because the resonance works in simpatico. They join frequencies. And you see, that's what happens with human beings. If I approach you and I've got a negative energy towards you, you'll feel it. You may not feel it on a conscious level, but you'll feel it on an unconscious level. And what that will do is it will key certain behaviors. When you key those behaviors in and they're negative, that's when you get the difficult situation, not the difficult person. So I want you to think about the people and conversations you're having to have, not as difficult people, not as difficult conversations, but as challenging opportunities that you can learn from. So how do you do it? Well, for me personally, I use something that I've been using for the last 15 years. You know, things do change, but we don't throw everything out like the baby with the bathwater. I've been using the E.Q.U.A.L philosophy. Some of you might have heard me speak before, and you've heard me talk about the E.Q.U.A.L philosophy, but for those of you who haven't, let me run it down really quickly for you. E.Q.U.A.L, equal. Now let's start with the E. The E in equal stands for empathy. Empathy and sympathy are not the same thing. I like to describe the difference like this. When you're sympathetic, it means that you're kind of going over someone else's territory. If you can imagine two neighbours having a chat, then there's a fence between them. When you're sympathetic, you climb over that fence into your neighbour's garden and you cry with them. When you're empathetic, on the other hand, you stay in your garden, you stay on your side of the fence, you see it from their point of view, but you're not emotionally attached in the same way as you would be if you're being sympathetic. So that's the difference between empathy and sympathy. When you have empathy for someone and you see it from their point of view, it means that you're not looking at it through an ego-driven mindset. You let go of your own ego. Remember, I said humility is one of the great keys to difficult conversations, and that means letting go of our own ego. The fastest way to gain empathy with anyone is to ask questions. Now, asking questions is not as easy as it might sound. Some of you already know that there are open questions and closed questions. Open questions are the key to gaining real empathy. Let me run those down for you. What might be the words that start open questions? We have who, we have what, we have where, we have when, we have how, we have which, and there's another one. But I'm going to ask you to remove this from your vocabulary. The word why. Now, any of you here have got children or grandchildren who are 2 or 3 years old? We've heard that word a lot. Why, mummy, 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 why, mummy, mummy, why, daddy, daddy, why, daddy, daddy? And it drives you mad after a while. But it's not just children who use it. We, when we're adults, we use it too. And I don't know if you're aware of the impact that that word why has on whoever you say it to. Let me give you an example. If someone was talking to me and they said, Rum, why did you choose to wear that blue shirt today? Did you hear how my voice went up and it became slightly accusatory? Well, that's what happens to everybody when they start a question beginning with why. It is very difficult to sound like a reasonable, rational, or even sane person when you say why. It makes people get on their guard. Every time you're tempted to use the word why, substitute it with the word what. Isn't what a lovely word? Did you hear how the word what dripped off my tongue and actually took my voice down rather than up? What? What made you decide to wear that blue shirt today, Rum? Well, I like it. I had it made in Thailand and I really like the shirt. So it makes me want to answer. You see, open questions are marvellous. They give us information in conversation. Let me say that again. They give us information in a conversational environment. It can feel as though you're simply having a conversation with someone, but really what you're doing is gathering and soliciting all the information that you need to negotiate your way out of a difficult circumstance. So we've got who, when, where, how, which, and our last one that we don't use is the why, okay? And the how, don't forget the how. That's also very important. On the flip side of that, you've got closed-ended questions. Now, closed-ended questions do two things for you. One is, well, they're both very powerful. One is very powerful in a positive sense, and the other is very powerful in a negative sense. Let's start with a positive. If you want to get commitment from someone, ask them a closed-ended question. Now you see, when you ask a closed-ended question to get commitment, it gives you a firm yes or no answer. Let me give you the most common one. Will you marry me? No, I'm not actually asking you to marry me, but if you'd like to, I'm single and available. But like, if someone asks you to marry them, what they say is, will you marry me? Now that's a closed question. They don't want a discussion about it. The only thing that they really want to hear is a yes. That's perfect. Another example is, have we decided together to change your behavior? Is this now going to work for you? Do we have agreement? All those things are leading to a conclusion, a closed question. You want conclusion at the end of your conversation. Now, the negative thing that closed questions do is that they run conversations directly into brick walls. Come on, we've all been out, sat, watched a couple next to us at dinner, and they're trying to have a conversation and it appears to be going nowhere. That's generally because they're asking each other closed questions. Do you like the meal? No. Is this a good restaurant? Yes. Can I drive you home? No. Etc., etc., etc. That's what closed questions do when they're used negatively. So here's the rule of thumb about open questions and closed questions. Open questions, open conversations. Closed questions, closed conversations. So when you're soliciting information at the beginning by asking those questions, you're getting all the information to build. At the end of the conversation, when you and the person or persons that you're talking with have finished and you want to reach agreement and settlement, that's when the closed questions come in. Ask me more about that. I'm sure I can help you. So what have we got? We've got empathize, we've got question, and that leads us to the most beautiful thing, understanding. How many of us take the time to understand? Or do we, like many people do, simply go to my next letter, which is the A, and start with action? For many of us, when it comes to difficult conversations, we are so petrified and so absorbed with how we feel that we start with the A. We start with action. And that's not going to get us anywhere. If you don't plan, you're going to fail. It's really important that you plan your communication and not consider it difficult. So the way to do that, empathize, get rid of your ego, see it from someone else's point of view. Ask the open questions, as we spoke about just a moment ago, and that gives us the understanding, which means that we can take the appropriate action. And it's the appropriate action that counts. What do I mean by appropriate action? I mean action that's going to fix the problem, not work on the personality. It's about a behavioural change, a procedural change, an attitudinal change. Yes, those are to do with the individual, but however, it's to do with changing things. Now that leads me to the L, the all-important L. Now L can stand for love as well as lead. Let me put it to you this way. When you get home this evening, or if you're already at home, try this with your partner. Empathize with your partner. Ask your partner what kind of a day they've had. Ask them all the open questions. Go down the list, how they're feeling, which way they walked or came home from work, etc., etc. That gives you some real feeling for them and it creates some empathy between you. And that's through the questioning process, which means that you'll understand, which would mean you could take the appropriate action, which might be to give them a back massage, or it might be to take them for a romantic meal. Do you see how that works? So it can lead to love, but what I really need it to lead to in this circumstance is lead. E.Q.U.A.L, and the L stands for lead. If you do not lead your communications, somebody else will. Now here's an interesting question. Value alignment. Ensuring your personal values aren't compromised by your professional environment. It took me a while to think about that, and I had to really think about what that meant. To me, what I think it means is this. Don't do anything that will compromise who you are and make you feel bad. We've all seen the institutional royal commissions at the moment into banking, into superannuations, into the Catholic Church. People in those institutions, they did things that compromised their ethics quite clearly. So what we're saying to you is that we know that sometimes we have to do things that don't make us feel good inside. You need to measure that yourself and see if it fits with your ethics and your values. If it doesn't, I think that's where we go back to some difficult conversations. You need to talk to whoever it is that has asked you to do this and let them know that you have value concerns. But also, we need to take time and look at our own values. Now here's one that might be challenging for you. Let's imagine that you're working in a regional area and you've not met someone from a different faith before, or who may look different to you, or may have come here as a migrant, or indeed as a refugee. Now, I'm not saying this is about you, but I'm talking to a lot of people here, And I know that some people feel that Australia is full, or Australia shouldn't be taking more refugees, or Australia should be giving to our farmers before we give to people in third world countries. That's your value system. That's your ethics. So if someone from a different country or a refugee comes into your visitor centre and asks for information, or you end up working alongside someone who's different to you, it may be time to question your own value system. Where did that value come from? How long have you had that value? Is that value still relevant to you today? Does it still serve you? I think it's important that we, over the course of our lives, check in with our value system, have a look at them, work out whether they're still working for you. I have to make a confession to you, and we're doing this on camera, so I guess I'm confessing to the world because it will be on the internet. It's a shocking secret. I was prejudiced. I was. I had a serious prejudice going on. And my children pointed out this prejudice to me. I was tattooist. I'll say that word again because it's hard to say and I like it. I was tattooist. What that meant was, well, I'll tell you the story. Well, there I was. It was a few years back and my son Sol, hi Sol, okay, he was doing his formal. He had his formal for his end of year 10 I think it was. It wasn't his year 12. I think it was first formal, year 10, and I had to buy him a suit. And we went to a major department store. In this department store, they had these big, full-length screens, and on these screens, they had these models walking up and down in all the gear, you know. Anyway, I looked at one of the male models, and I saw that he had a full neck tattoo. I mean, it was huge, and a full sleeve on this side. And without even realizing, I turned to my children and I went, why did they make him a model? Look at him. Who goes out and gets a full neck tattoo and arm tattoos and then expects to be a model? And it was my daughter who said, Dad, that is so tattooist. And I said, what's tattooist? Anyway, we left it at that. But that night, as we often do, we sit round and we have a family dinner. I love to cook. We had lamb chops that night, done with mint and mashed potato, fantastic. Anyway, we were sitting around having dinner and I said, kids, what do you mean that I am tattooist? Well, both of them looked at me and they said, Dad, things have changed. Tattoos are commonplace and everybody or lots of people have got one. So I had to question my feeling about tattoos. You see, when I was growing up, there were only 3 sets of people who had tattoos: sailors, people who'd been in jail, and movie stars. That was it. They were the only people who had tattoos. And I was always told, never get a tattoo, you look like you've been to prison. So that kind of stayed with me, and it stayed with me for many years. But now I realise that I'm not in the 70s or the 80s or even the 60s. I'm in 2018. And as I walk down the street, I can't judge someone simply because they've decided to get a tattoo. In fact, in my audience now, I'm sure many of you got tattoos, and I wish to formally apologise for my former attitude. Please forgive me. But I'm enlightened now, and I've realised that tattoos are a personal choice. And would I employ someone with a tattoo? Well, yes, I would. Would I be friends with someone with a tattoo? The person behind this camera right now has several, and he's a very good friend of mine. So yes, I would be friends with someone with a tattoo. So when it comes to our values, it's really important that we monitor them on an ongoing basis, find out if they're still relevant, keep the ones that are, and the ones that aren't, turf them off, let them go. Thank you. Here's another question. How to be a champion for your department, to your managers and to your decision makers. Or, put it another way, How to ensure a core team bond and spirit in the face of uncertainty, although it might be slightly negative. Well, let's answer that. The first thing I'd like to say is speak with good purpose about your organisation, your department and your co-workers. So easily can we slip into the negative talk. How easy is it when someone says, how's work? And the first thing that you do is you go straight to the, oh, it's not good. This is happening, that's happening. She's horrible to me, he's horrible to me. The boss is terrible. It's all gone pear-shaped. No one needs to hear that. In fact, it's quite destructive, not just to other people and the person you're talking to, or even your team members. It's really destructive to yourself. It's really important that you speak with good purpose about the people you work with and the direction of the organisation. If you're not happy with the direction of the organisation, I think it's vitally important that you speak up. As I said before, earlier in our filming, I spoke about being courageous and dealing with difficult situations. Well, that's what we're dealing with here. You must make up your mind what it is that you want from your job. And for most of us, it's a pleasant working environment to stand up for our team. You spend as many waking hours with your team members as you do the people you care to live with, particularly if you work full time. So I'm going to say this. Here are my 3 rules to ensure a good team dynamic. Honesty, humility, helpfulness. The 3 H's. When you're talking with your team members, speak with good purpose. Here's a question for you. How many of you have a team charter? Like a Magna Carta. The Magna Carta was created in England many, many years ago when bad King John, I think it was, bad King John, he was upsetting the barons, and the barons brought him in and said, here's a charter of behaviours that we want you to stick to and the people will agree to. It was the Magna Carta, and that's formed the basis of many of the world's greatest documents in terms of rights and responsibilities for citizens. Does your department have a charter of behaviours? Does your organisation have a charter of behaviours? Have you got together, had a team day, put everybody around the table and sat down and said, we agree to the following. We agree to speak with good purpose. We agree to be cheerful. We agree not to be negative. We agree as a team that we will be customer centric. These are a few points that often come out on organisational charters and departmental charters. It's really important that everybody signs that charter. It's put on the wall and it can be referred back to by you, your managers and your supervisors when someone isn't meeting the line. You see, otherwise it's really unfair. Let me give you an example of how unfair it is without a charter. Imagine that you're driving down the road. You're about to go on holidays. You're on a family holiday. You've got the car. You're all in the car. You're driving down the highway. You're doing 110 kilometers an hour because you believe that 110 kilometers an hour is the speed limit. Now that's kind of fair enough. However, the policeman pulls you over and says, I'm sorry, the speed limit here is only 100. You say, but I didn't see any signs saying it wasn't 110. He says, there aren't any signs. I just know it's 100 and not 110. Now, how many of us would complain that wasn't fair and would go to the court and would stand there and would argue with the judge saying, I don't deserve this ticket because I was under the impression it was 110. No one told me it was 100. There were no signs to say it was 100. Well, that's like managing and being in a team without a charter. Because a charter is like your road rules. When everyone knows your road rules, well, we're not entirely safe. We are working towards zero. And please, when you're driving in the country or driving anywhere, please drive carefully. But what I'm saying to you now is this. If there were no road rules, do you think there'll be more accidents or less accidents? There would be more. You're absolutely right. So I'm going to ask you to sit down with your managers, sit down with your team leaders, sit down with your team members and nut out a charter of agreements. If you can't do it for yourselves, you can always engage us as outside consultants to come and help you, or engage whoever you need to. But we're going nowhere without a charter of behaviours. And that way, everyone knows the road rules, everybody can stick to the speed limit, and no one gets a fine. Hope that makes sense. Here's my favourite question. How can we help our team members adapt to disruptional changes in their role in terms of staff and volunteers who may be reluctant to implement digital technology to the Visitor Information Centre and move away from the traditional counter model? Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got news for you. Like King Canute stood on the shores facing the tide and said, "I can hold it back, hold back the tide." And then soon found out when he got very, very wet that he could not hold back the tide. Neither can we. We cannot hold back the tide of technology. It's here, whether we like it or not. There's nothing we can do about it. We can moan about it, we can try and avoid it, we can hide under our beds, pull the blankets over our heads and pretend it's not happening. Well, it is. Ladies and gentlemen, technology is here to stay, and it's only going to increase. Artificial intelligence is a fact. It's not science fiction, it's not Star Trek or Star Wars. It's here, now. In fact, I was talking to a very good friend of mine, and she gave me a little saying when we were talking about this. And she said, talking about the future is so 90s. Now let me say that again. Talking about the future is so 1990s. Now it made me laugh, and it made her laugh, but then we started to discuss it. And we realised that we've been around long enough to remember the 90s, and we remember, and I was doing this kind of work in the 90s, and I remember talking, and someone asked me to go to these conferences and be a futurist and talk about the future and all the changes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, those changes are already here. They are here today. We cannot hide from them. Now, I've mentioned this before, and I called it my everything device. You see, the only reason that this is still called a phone is because our language lags, that's L-A-G-S, time. The thing that this does least in everybody's world under 25, and also in mine, is actually make phone calls. But we still call it a phone because it has a sense of history with us. Well, here's the deal. This thing here, your everything device, is your most valuable piece of technology. I bet we've all got one. Even those of us who don't like technology have got some form of this. It might be one that's an iPhone 4. You might even still have a Nokia, but that's still a smartphone when you consider we used to do that. We can't get away from it. I'll give you one story about technology. It's a sad story, and it's a true story, and it's a brand that you're going to know. And that brand was Kodak. You see, I was asked to go and speak to Kodak directors many years ago now, and this was just before digital cameras came in. Do you remember? Some of us will remember. If you're under 25, you probably won't remember, but there was a time when we went on holidays, and what we did was we had our camera and we'd take pictures, and we had film in it. You remember? Snap, snap. And we'd have either 12, 24 or 36. And we'll take our shots, and then we'll take the roll of film out, and we'll put it in a little bag, and we'll take it to the chemist. We'll give it to the chemist, and the chemist at that point would send it off. It would take 2 or 3 days, and that was express, and it would be sent back to us, and we could look at our photographs. How primitive does that feel now? When we all walk around with one of these, and we take as many photographs as we like, when we like, how we like. We discard the ones that we don't, and we keep the ones that we like, and we can get them printed if we wish. Well, I was sitting with Kodak this year, and I was talking to the managing director of the photo services division, and he threw me out of his office. Now, I'm not kidding you. He threw me out of his office because I dared to say this: your business has no right to exist in the 21st century. He thought he would be around forever. His exact words to me as he was throwing me out of his office was, "We are Kodak. We have been around for 100 years and we'll be around for another 100 years. Well, he called me back. I saw him in October. He called me back in March, and he said, "What are we going to do? This year, everyone got a digital camera." Kodak Photo Services is no longer a division of Kodak. In fact, Kodak had major offices here in Victoria, which are no more. The only thing that I can tell you is in the 21st century, we need to embrace change, accept change, and learn to love disruption, because that is now the norm. There's no getting away from it, no getting around it, so we've got to embrace it. If you want to be volunteering or working in the 21st century, you've got to expect that things are going to change. You see, our visitors have changed. When someone comes to our visitor information centre, they may not want to talk to us. Let me tell you a secret about Generation X, Generation Y, and the baby boomers. We still like people. We still talk to people. We'll have a chat. Now, let me tell you a secret about Gen A, Gen Z, and the millennials. They will go out of their way to avoid talking to people. That's why they do this all the time. All the time. And that's why they want to find their information online. You see, their everything device. They want to pull up into your small town. They want to be able to go to their everything device and find out all the information without ever setting foot in a visitor's information area. And if they do, they're not going to want to pick up a brochure. They're going to want to do it on this. Get with it. How to implement changes to your workplace to keep up with trends when managers might be reluctant to change. Wow, what a question. I think that brings us full circle, doesn't it? If you think about what we was talking about right at the very beginning, our very first question, which was managing an intergenerational workforce. Because you've been in a position a long time and you've managed to become a manager, that doesn't give you a right to stop and stop others from progressing and stopping new ideas. I've got something for you. Some of you are not going to like this. Some of you are going to laugh, and some people are going to think I'm terrible. Are you an organizational terrorist? Wow. Did I just say that? Organizational terrorist? Yes, I did. Now, some of you are asking, what's an organizational terrorist? How dare he say that? Well, this is what an organizational terrorist is, in my view. An organizational terrorist is someone who will use covert means rather than overt means to stop the implementation of technology and new systems and processes because they are scared. I get it. It's okay to be scared. I mean, let's be honest, not all of us are in our 20s anymore. Some of us are in our 50s. Some of us are in our 60s. And one or two of you might be in your 70s. But that doesn't give us the right to stop and hold things up and abandon change and abandon technology. Like I said before, you're not king to Newt. Time and tide are always going to change, and we've got to get down with that. We've got to become positive with that. We've got to embrace it and accept it. The worst thing that you can do for your career, if you are over 35 and in a senior management position or even a supervisor position, is to try and stop change because you think you know it all and you want it to stop where you are. All that's going to do is make you literally redundant faster, because your value to your organisation and your visitor information centre is diminished. It's perfectly okay not to know it all. It's perfectly okay to have to learn. You know, one of the things that I find really strange is the number of people who won't go to training or attend training courses with a mindset of, I know everything, been here, why do I need to be here? I've been doing this for 25 years. Believe me, I hear that almost on a weekly basis. If you're not prepared to invest in yourself, why would anybody invest in you? If you're not prepared to invest in yourself and learn new technologies, why would I come to your visitor information centre? You see, the everything device is taking over. We need to ensure that we are aware of all the apps, the new ways things are happening, the new things that are going on. We need to be embracing this technology. We need to be looking at it. We need to be looking at the internet, the intranet, the Internet of Things. Now that's new. I read about that last week. It's fantastic. You can't deny it. We can't reject it. Get on board with it. And it brings us to another question that we asked earlier, how to have that difficult conversation. If your manager, your leader, is slowing you down, I urge you to speak to them and have that difficult conversation. Think of it as a challenging conversation. Work out your strategy. Go back to E.Q.U.A.L, empathise, see it from their point of view, ask them questions on how you might help, understand them, take the appropriate action, and then lead them. I'm going to finish on this note. I was watching a documentary, David Attenborough type thing, and it was on wolves. And I was interested to see that with wolves and the pack, it is the slowest at the front and the leader at the very, very back, and in between everybody else. Now, I was fascinated to know what made the wolves behave in this way, because the true leader understood that the pack can only run at the speed of its slowest members, so they're at the front. Then they've got the biggest and the strongest next after them to defend the pack. Then come the little ones and the mums, and then there's another pack of strong ones as well, and the leader right at the very back, because it's the leader's job to watch everybody's back. Well, as a leader, you don't have to be skilled at the technology, but you need to surround yourself with the best people, and that will make it excellent. Thank you for watching this video. I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed sharing with you today and talking with all of you. Hopefully next year you'll get to see me in person and I'll be able to answer all your questions in a live and interactive forum. For those of you who know how I work, I promise to still be lively and interactive and work with you all. I hope this has helped you and you can take away lots of information and share it with your co-workers. I wish you all the best in your region or your municipality, and if at any time you'd like to call us, ask me questions or email us, We're always open to communication. Now, some of you might know me from ACE training, and some of you might know me from Indigo training. But if you really want to get hold of me, the best way to get hold of me is Rum Charles, okay? Rum Charles. Google Rum Charles and you'll find me, and I'm very easy to find. But if you'd like to book a course or talk to me about any training, it's the Australian Institute of Soft Skills Training, ACE Training, www.acetraining.com.au.